Hello and welcome back to the Woodshop Life. This is a follow-up to the laser. We're going to do a bit of a walk around, walk through. This is a sort of 2-week follow-up to having it delivered. You can see on our channel the other videos I've got of it, which are installing the fume extraction, adding solenoid, and some other videos. If you're interested in seeing more, click on channel name and you'll find them in our other videos. This is from Acctek, and I've owned 4 lasers before, Chinese lasers that is, from various other brands, which I've always not been super excited about. In addition to the 4 Chinese lasers I've owned, I also have extensive experience with Epilogues and Trotex. I've used the Trotex Speedy 300s and 400s, as well as their Fiber Flex series up to 500, the Speedy 500 size, the Epilogue Helix, and the mid-size one, Legend, that's the one, the Epilogue Legend. So I've done quite a bit of work with lasers. This is custom built to my specifications. I've specified every last detail of these, from the rails to the laser tubes and power supplies. So this is a custom build, so it is more expensive than just buying one off eBay, but it's something I would highly recommend you look at doing, is going straight to the manufacturer in China and getting what you need, not just buying something off Amazon or eBay, which is just maybe a couple $100, couple £100 cheaper, but is essentially rubbish compared to this. I'm really happy with this one. I think this has got some exceptional additions to it, and I'm going to take you through those. Firstly, one of our options which I had on this is the honeycomb bed. It's much cheaper to buy the honeycomb with the laser than to buy it after the fact, because these are the good ones are big rigid honeycomb, not the expanded aluminium version. These are steel, folded steel inside here in a metal frame. I have 3 honeycomb beds because you're going to get them dirty. I've got one for wood, one for acrylic, and one for clean stuff. So wood is going to leave a lot of residue of the resin. Acrylic is going to leave a lot of residual acrylic, and I've actually seen honeycombs completely packed full of acrylic resin, which is fine if you're just cutting acrylic, but if you then go and cut something else, it gets really messy. These are quite heavy, so you really can't get these shipped economically after the fact. So underneath the honeycomb bed, we have a knife bed. I ordered extra knife slats with mine, just 5 extra, because the ends of these sometimes look like they've been cut with a butter knife. These ones from Acctek are pretty good, so I'm pretty pleased with these. What I will end up doing though is shaving just a little bit off the top of each one, so the honeycomb will sit over them with its lip, and that will get the honeycomb nice and flat. One thing I'm really excited about on this laser, compared to other lasers I've owned, is the setup of this underneath the table. So under the table is this whole enclosure essentially, which has a parts tray in the middle. This is particularly exciting to me because on my previous 1290 size lasers, I've found that they were just open on the bottom. They didn't have a structure for the bed. This is a very solid structure. All around here is welded 3mm steel. It's not just cheap aluminium extrusion. Your cheap eBay and AliExpress and Amazon units just have cheap aluminium extrusion, which these knives sit on. This is a fully welded, folded steel table. And further to that, like I say, it's got this shaped enclosure. So if you're cutting small parts, they all end up down in that middle part. That small box in the center of the enclosure is actually a drawer. And that leads me to something else. All of the catches on these panels are really nice quality. They're all magnetic lock into place. They're much better than the other ones I've had on previous lasers. So this is a drawer which pulls out. As you can see, it's got all the small parts. And when Taryn's been cutting a lot of pieces in here, all the small parts are just landing through, falling down into the drawer, and all she needs to do to collect all those small parts is just pull that drawer out, take it away and collect them all. It's a lot easier than trying to vacuum all the small parts out from the bottom of the bed, or trying to find that small part that fell through because you weren't using honeycomb. So I'm super impressed by this bed structure. It is so much more rigid than any other Chinese laser I've seen. So another thing I really like about this laser is underneath this bed, we have a fume extraction port. That's capturing all the smoke which is coming out from the bottom of the cut, and it captures a lot of that. You can see by the discoloration of the vent that it's capturing a lot of smoke on there. You also have a separate connection to the port back here, which covers the overdraft. So there's a gap at the front of the laser, air flows over the top, some goes down to the bottom port, some goes over the top, and that just helps clear the surface of any smoke, especially when you're engraving. One thing I'm not thrilled with is that the laser is using inductive proc sensors on just very cheap sheet metal bent pieces for homing. Inductive proc sensors are accurate to about 0.4 of a millimeter or so for the very best Panasonic ones. So not ideal. Micro switches are much more accurate and repeatable. So another thing I've done with this laser is I've put a red dot beam in the back by the laser beam with a beam combiner. So you can see it bouncing off the second mirror there and coming off a beam combiner in the back there. That's a feature which typically you won't see on a Chinese laser, but it only cost $50 to add. So what it means is, once I have that collimated with the beam, as I mostly do now, you can see exactly on your workpiece where the laser beam is going to hit, instead of having a little laser pointer stuck on the side pointing down at an angle, which, depending on where the Z height is going to vary the position, or if you bump it, it's going to vary the position. The laser beam fires exactly where the red dot beam goes through because it's following the same optical path. So continuing on top, I have gone with the Ruida RDC6332G controller specifically for this keypad. The cheaper Ruida controllers, the 320C has just a graphics LCD, which is just basically dot matrix. It can't show you the cut, it can't show you details on there. And then the next model up has the 6442G, has basically the same structure as this, but no keypad. I paid extra to get the keypad because I can go in here and say speed is going to be 100 millimeters per second, hit enter and move. And that's really good if you're trying to position something accurately. I can jump back and go speed 20 millimeters a second, and then move the laser very slowly. It also allows me to much more easily select files from the USB, do network configuration, all the stuff you can do through laser work other than setting up the job itself can be done through this control panel. Coming around to the side of the machine, we have a main breaker here, which is a proper breaker. So if the machine goes a bit nuts, it's gonna break there before it hits your main circuit board breakers on your power supply. We've got Ethernet broken out and we've got USB. Personally, I prefer these on the back of the machine, but they are what they are. We have everything in here is labeled, which I think is really nice. They've put label printer printouts on everything describing what it is, which is really convenient. And one thing which they've gone overboard on, which most Chinese lasers, they don't do at all, is they've gone and put labels on every single wire. So you know what every wire is. If you need to do any maintenance or changes, you can immediately see what they are, which is fantastic. A lot of Chinese lasers I've seen don't even put ferrules on here. For an extra couple of £100 in buying this laser, I've gone with a good quality manufacturer. We've got ferrules, everything's crimped, everything's done properly. It's not a big deal to have just wires jammed in there, but if you have wires just jammed in there, they can, with vibration, work harden and break off quite easily, which is not going to help your machine. We also have a filter on the input line, so this is going to stop any noise from messing up the machine from other industrial equipment you might have, and it's also going to stop this from messing with other electronics on your same circuit. Another nice thing about this electronics cabinet compared to a couple of other lasers I've owned is that this is completely isolated. There's just a couple of holes down the bottom here for cables to go through, or for welds in the enclosure to go through. Other than that, this is completely sealed off from the rest of the laser. So you're not going to get laser smoke in here, and laser smoke does not mix with electronics very well. It's kind of corrosive and is not going to do your electronics much good. So this is, to me, as an electronics engineer, superb. Coming around to the back of the machine, it is a bit darker. So there's some good things, bad things here. Firstly, I live in the UK. This came wired up with a European plug. So someone hasn't looked at where this is actually going and figured out the right plug for it. Secondly, the earth wasn't connected to the power plug. It was only on the chassis earth here. So I've connected that up internally, which is, if you're not an electrician or experienced with electronics, you may not be comfortable with that. But it should be done to your power earth rather than relying on you hooking this up to an earth post somewhere stuck into the ground. The other thing is that this is the water cooler alarm, and the cable on this is unbelievably short. When combined with the cables, the hoses going to the laser tube, it doesn't really give you a lot of options as to where to place the cooler. It has to be dead center in the middle of the machine. Not ideal. I would like to extend this at some point. I'll do that. But we get to another couple of things I really like. This is the laser power supply access hatch. Other lasers I've owned and Chinese lasers I've seen have just had the laser power supply sitting around in the bottom of the laser enclosure where they're exposed to all the fumes and everything. And you know, these things run at 20,000 volts plus. It's 18,000 volts when the machine's running, 24 to 30,000 volts to strike the arc. You don't really want that. I've specified specifically the Recce power supply, the P18. As far as I'm aware, there are no clones of this on the market. Normally you get the JNDMY power supplies, which are so cheap and they are terrible. This will take anywhere from 80 to 250 volts in and is much more solidly built. You mean, look at the size of this thing compared to the cheap Chinese ones, which are about half the size of this for the same wattage. These are really well built and they've handled a lot of crap. Whereas before I've had power supplies that have just blown randomly all the time. I went through 3 cheap Chinese power supplies before I went just exclusively to Recce power supplies. You also have a beautiful readout here, which is upside down at the moment, but it shows my input voltage, 234 volts, 235 volts AC in, input control voltage, output amperage, so no little dinky analog gauge. It's showing you what the power supply thinks it's outputting at all times, and it's also showing the voltage you're outputting at all times, which means you can get this thing set so that 100% power on your laser controller is 100% power on your laser tube, which is important because if your laser tube, if it's set to high in voltage, you will end its life early. You can also see things like ambient temperature, ambient humidity, and the amount of hours of work time that this laser has had. And then it goes on to some stuff about the fact that Recce is the most amazing manufacturer of glass tubes in China. So we also have our laser fan mouth. This is our port for getting the hose in. As I've mentioned in the laser venting video, this is really nicely done. It's not attached to the laser directly. It goes in and directly to the 2 ports. We have this nice little access hatch to our hoses internally, which is really well thought out. If you want to see more about that, have a look at my other videos. I specified the 750 watt blower fan rather than the 550 watt, which is standard. It's not that much of a difference, but these bigger ones are certainly a lot more robust than the plastic bouncy castle fans I've seen on eBay units. eBay units, if you're lucky, come with a very plastic fantastic fan, which burns itself out in no time. Awful. These ones are a bit more robust. It cost me barely anything more, like $20, I think, to go from the 550 up to the 750 watt. I mean, it's a no-brainer, really. It's when you're spending this much money on a machine, why wouldn't you get a slightly better bit of extraction? So speaking of the chiller, it's getting kind of dark back here as we go further back. This is the CW5200 industrial chiller, which I also paid extra for. The CW5000 chiller is not a great option. They've used multiple different types of metal on the coolant loop, and it actually creates a slight battery effect, which will corrode the metal. I've had a CW5000 cooler fail before because of this. It's all over the internet, you can read about it. 5200 doesn't have this problem. I actually bought 2 of these chillers, one for the CNC router and one for the laser. These are really nice. They're refrigerated. They're not just relying on a radiator to cool the tube. With the tube as powerful as I have, you must have a refrigerated chiller. But even on the like 40 watts, 50 watt, 60 watt tubes, I'd still recommend a refrigerated chiller. It makes a huge difference when your laser tube is running at a consistent temperature. The power output is nice and even, and the lifespan is greatly enhanced. Up top, we've got just an old laptop, which I'm using to run the laser software. It sits on top. I don't care if it's in here all the time, just sitting on there. It's about 10 years old now, so it is what it is. Pretty standard cover for the laser tube. Again, everything has these really nice latches, which I love so much. Let's have a look at the tube inside. So this is the meat of the laser engraver. This is the laser tube itself. They're big, they're expensive. I bought a spare one because they cost more than their actual value to ship in the future than they do to buy with the laser. I'm not thinking of it as a replacement for this one. When this one blows, this is a genuine Recce tube, which is rated 10,000 hours. I'm probably going to replace this laser with probably a Trotec or something before I get to that sort of hour rating. But I have some other projects in mind. So this tube has a laser measurement graph on it. So this is from the factory. It's certified by some university in China. They do an actual wattage test to prove that it is 150 watts output maximum. The peak power is 150 watts. The agreed power is 130 watts, which means that this Recce W6 is really a 130 watt tube at normal output. You don't need to derate this. With really cheap tubes, you have to derate them 80% or so. It's already done for you, which is super nice. We've got a nice big silicon cap here over the high voltage input to really helps keep down any safety issues. Further along the tube, we have my little red dot beam combiner. So that's the red dot laser there. We've got a lens here, which is zinc selenide, the same as your lens in the front of the laser. It bounces a good portion of the red dot beam and passes pretty much all of the laser beam. So the laser beam bounces off this mirror and passes straight through this lens, and a large amount of the red light is going to bounce off and get in the same beam path as the infrared laser, which is awesome. So on top of here, I have a pack of 200 Zeiss lens wipes. You've got to keep your lenses clean. You've got to keep your mirrors clean. Residue gets on them. Keep them clean with good quality lens wipes. Don't use anything which could have any speck of dust or material on it which could scratch your lens. These are always clean. They're designed for optics. Awesome choice, very cheap on Amazon. And that takes us back around to the front. The only thing I'd really note on this is this has very heavily tinted acrylic. We don't have brilliant lighting in this workshop. We use photography lights whenever we're working on stuff, and this makes it really hard to see what's inside. It's just to reduce glare, but stuff I'm doing doesn't really have glare. If I had known they were going to put this in here, I would have specified just clear acrylic. The tinting has nothing to do with it stopping reflected light. The reflected light of this is 100% absorbed by acrylic. Even if you put 1/10 of a millimeter of acrylic on here, you'd be 100% protected from reflected light. So overall on this laser, I'm really happy with what I got. So I spent $6,000 US to get it to the UK. I spent about £1,000 on mostly paperwork fees from EQ-Line. If I was buying this again, I would have had it all fees paid, customs paid, everything paid to EQ-Line in China. They charged me something like £400 in clearance fees and like documentation fees and things, not from the government. I have zero problem paying the value-added tax and duties on this. That's expected, that's normal, I'm not trying to avoid that. However, £350 for like a documentation fee, which is basically just EQ line saying, hey, we got it, to the government, and calculating your duties for you. I had to tell them the HS code, I had to tell them everything. Like, that's out of line. If I had have got that sorted at the Chinese side and paid for it, basically door-to-door cost, that would have been much cheaper. So I could have saved myself some money on that. But for that $6,000 US, I got the laser engraver, 2 blowers, 2 chillers, 2 laser tubes, 3 honeycomb beds, 4th axis, rotary axis for this, which I haven't shown you. I haven't used it yet. I got a hell of a lot for my money, really. This is going to cost you about $3,950 US, just the machine. The laser, as specified here, was $3,950 US. If you go for a smaller tube, you can get that down much cheaper. Andy at Acctek was really quite good to deal with. However, if you're interested in purchasing a Chinese laser, you can email laser@mythiccrafts.com. We're going to set that up as a email which you can send us questions to. We get nothing out of it, but I'm going to help you through the process dealing with Chinese laser companies, making sure you get the specification you need, the power you need or don't need, because if you're doing a lot of engraving, you do not want a 150 watt tube like I have. I'm doing an awful lot of cutting with my laser, so I wanted a more powerful tube to make that go faster. So I'll help you work through the process of buying a Chinese laser, getting it specified to your requirements, getting it sized to your requirements. A 1390 laser is barely any more expensive than a 690. 900 by 600 millimeter, 2 foot by 3 foot laser is basically exactly the same price as a 1.3 meter by 900 millimeter laser, which is what, 4 foot by 3 foot. I'm really pleased with this. There's certainly a few things which Acctek could have done, spending a couple more dollars on the machine, and it potentially could have been a little bit nicer. Just spending the time before delivery to just wipe the machine out, get loose screws out of the bottom, spend a little bit of time getting the bed perfectly leveled off, putting an air assist solenoid in there. Solenoid cost me £12 or so on Amazon. They probably could have done that for $2 or $3, and it wouldn't have added really any cost to the machine, but it would have made life a lot easier so that the functionality in the software does what it says it does. Air assist on, off. Very simple. Like I say, a couple of things they could have done a little bit differently, but overall, having owned Chinese lasers before, having worked with lasers which cost £50,000, almost 10 times the cost of this from the European and American brands, I'm exceptionally happy with this. The bed structure on this alone is so superior to every other laser I've owned which has come out of China, that this laser is worth it for that alone. I'm super impressed with the bed structure and enclosure on this. So if you're interested in owning a Chinese laser, consider emailing laser@mythiccrafts.com. It'll be in the description below. I will help you out. I get absolutely nothing for that. I'm hoping if we get enough interest and sales through it over the next year or so, they may be able to give me a slightly bigger discount on a large CNC router than I'd otherwise get, but that's all I get out of it. I just want to help you guys get the correct tool for what you want. I know a lot of people are interested in buying lasers or have bought lasers and not been happy with them. So let's see if we can help you out with that. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you think this laser is fantastic, leave a like. Love to hear your comments below if you've got any. If you would like to have a look at some of the other videos, see if this is a channel which you think might be interesting. We've got lasers, woodworking, CNC stuff, all sorts of projects. Would love to have you along for the journey. Please hit subscribe. We're uploading fairly regularly. Thank you very much for watching and have a fantastic day.